She warned us.
Okay.
Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Liesl Fenner. I am the Public Art Program Director at the Maryland State Arts Council, and we're very excited that you're joining us for the Public Art Track as part of the Maryland Arts Summit, Digital Summit, I should say. I am the co-host of this session with artist Judy Sutton Moore of Silver Spring, Maryland, and ART Research Enterprises Fabricators, who will be joining us on this session, physically distanced in their fabrication shop. So I think this really reflects the COVID-19 situation we're working in, seeing you all masked there. So just a few navigational tips. If you are looking for another session, you just go up to the upper left and you'll see where it says schedule session 1 of 2. You see a drop down menu and you'll see all the sessions that are available at this time. There may be some folks still logging in and getting their session rolling, so feel free to come back and forth if you'd like. So feel free to interact with our presenters and each other in the chat. As you see, the chat is on the left side of the screen. So feel free to ask a question there, or we encourage you to click on the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of your screen. And I will be posing those questions to the presenters after their presentations. All right. So let me just open with this. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. We acknowledge we are standing on ancestral lands, and we honor the thousands of enslaved Africans whose lives were physically and spiritually stolen. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Okay, so now we will turn it over to Judy Sutton Moore of Silver Spring, Maryland. And I'll just adjust some screens here.
Hello, I'm Judy Sutton Moore, and I'm very proud to tell people I'm a public artist. I've had a fantastic career. I've been able to work both nationally and internationally. But when I began doing public art, there wasn't any such thing as public art. It did not have a label. I had a lot of adventures, many misadventures, and some near disasters as I would drive my truck from coast to coast, sleeping in it, brushing my teeth at McDonald's, and installing my work. Eventually, public art became a recognized form, and we actually got commissions. Now, up to that point, all of my fabrication I had been doing on my driveway. As it became bigger and heavier, I had a choice. I was either going to have to hire people to help and buy bigger equipment or find a fabricator. Well, where I was living, there was no such thing as an art fabricator. In fact, I didn't even know such a thing existed. So I went begging to the local industrial fabricators, and they continued doing my work for me. But I still was hauling the work. I was still doing the installing. I was still doing a lot of hard labor. Fast forward to 2001, and I moved to Maryland, and I fell into what I now consider the greatest career endeavor, and that was working with ART. By working with ART, it gave me the opportunity to actually design the kind of work that I wanted to do, the kind of work that I could not have to worry about the materials, because they could do anything. They could use multiple materials. I no longer had to be concerned with, would the truck hold the piece of sculpture? Did size and shape and weight cause a problem? I was free to design as I wanted. So let's take a look at, if you're going to use a fabricator, what you need to look for. Can you advance the next 2 slides for me, please, Will? Next slide after that. Here we go. Okay. Now, as of looking for a fabricator, and these are the things that I not only desire, but I think are essential. Find out what services they can provide, and the more they can provide for you, the better. The more time you have to spend on designing your work and less time you spend on doing the things like the hauling and the welding, the better it is. It's not that you can't weld. It's not that I couldn't weld, but I can't weld as good as those guys do, because they do it every day, and I did it about like every 6 weeks. Okay, will their assistants allow you more time to work in your art? Definitely, for sure. Is the quality of the work they produce what you want? You have to remember that your next commission not only depends on your design, but it depends on the finished product. And if they're producing a quality product, then that helps you. Are they dependable? Oh my goodness, is that important? Because it's up to you to be on time and in budget, and they can help you with that. Interested in your work? Yes. You want them to be interested in your work. That's one advantage of art over industrial. The guys that I worked with industrially, and I worked at some internationally as well as nationally, they were all great guys, but it was just a job. With ART, my experience has been that it's a personal thing. They take pride in being a part of actually creating a piece of art. Can they collaborate and develop a relationship with you? Yes. Can they work with the materials and cost and finishes? It's been great for me to be able to go to ART and say, I think I want this. And sometimes Ben will say, well, you know, we have this new method, we can do this. And I learned of things that I didn't know and ways that can do my art. So I'll give you a few examples. You want to do the next slide for me, Will? Here's a few examples. This is the piece that we installed this last summer called The Guardian. It's in Prince George at Sarka. And we began, next slide, please. Now, when I go to ART, I always I go to them before I make a proposal, because by talking to them first, then I can work out with them a budget, because I don't want to propose a piece that when it gets ready to get built is going to end up costing twice as much as the amount of commission I have. So I do a model and I do drawings, and I take them to ART. We talk about it. We talk about finishes, materials, and etc., and work on a budget. Next slide. Okay, I've gotten the commission and we're beginning fabrication. This is still the same piece, the 2 pieces that were with the Guardians. And this piece was tall. It's 20 feet tall. And so they built the points. You can see the different stages of the fabrication there. Next slide, please. Now, this piece had some detail in it. This piece, because of the shape of it, you can't just take a piece of stainless steel, and this is stainless steel, and just bend it any way you want. You've got to know how the metal bends. And this is one of the things that the guys like Brian, who's welding there, and Ben and Will and all the other guys know how to do. They know how the metal's going to react. And look at the tiny pieces that Brian has had to put there. Now, I wanted this thing, remember how it looked? I wanted it to be smooth. These guys can weld two clouds together and it looks like a piece of silk. Now, coming from a piece of like that image there, that's a lot of hard work besides the fact a lot of good knowledge of what they're doing. Next piece, next slide. There, you can see where they begin the finishing there on the side of blending the wells so that you don't see all those little pieces. And there's the finished piece. Now, if you look above my head over on the left, that's what those little pieces where Brian was working. And it looks like something that's been poured out of a bottle. That's the kind of finish and the kind of image that I wanted from my piece, and ART was able to produce that for me. Next slide. This is our installation day. Now ART arranged to have the truck, which is over there on the right, and those are the two pieces laying on it, to transfer the piece from ART to Brandywine, and we have the crane. That was on June 13th, and you'll notice it was a day of absolute fry pan. The temperatures on site coming off the ground were 110 to 118 degrees, and we were out there for 14 hours. Oh my goodness, it was fun, but interesting adventure. Okay, next slide. Here, one piece has already been lifted off. This is the second piece that's being lifted off of the thing. Now, you know, you don't just pick these pieces up and drop them in. It takes men who know how to handle the ropes, how to move the sculpture. This is something that I had when I was doing this on my own, was a big problem because I was always trying to hire people to help and they didn't know what they were doing. And I was lucky that there was never any real serious accident. Next slide. After the pieces were put in place, the hooks that were used to move it had to be cut off, and then the finishing of the polishing. And there's the three guys down there. They started out clean in the morning. By the end of the afternoon, it really showed the temperature and the hard work they had done. And the next slide gives you some was the finished piece. There we go. This isn't the only piece. I've done a lot of work with ART. Next slide. This was the butterfly tree that's in Fort Washington. It's a good sized tree. Next slide. Here you see on the left is the tree that's on the truck, and they had to wrap it in saran wrap so that the butterflies could handle the traveling. And there's Ben, he's up 22 feet in the air doing his magic with the welding of the clouds. Next slide. This was another piece. I sort of seemed like for a while I'd seem to be doing a lot of trees. This is in Tacoma Park. Next slide. And also they do bronze casting. This is the only current public art pieces that I have in cast bronze that are in Wheaton. ART does all of my studio cast bronzing as well as any studio fabrication besides the public art. Okay, that'll give you an idea of how I have worked and the advantages that I have had by working with an art fabricator. Thank you.
Judy, we actually have a quick question, I think, before we go on to ART.
Okay.
From Jackie Crocetta, how did you create your maquette for the Guardians? What types of images did you include in your proposal? And maybe that's the question to how detailed were your drawings before you went to ART?
Well, I go through a lot of stages of maquettes before I get to the one that, that one started out as clay. By the time I got to ART, I had my design that I wanted, pretty much complete. That specific one that you saw, I made two of those because one was used for the proposal and one was used that I left with ART because it's all scale drawings. That way they can use it for measuring to do scale when they go to mark it up. The engineer drawings, which was in the background of that slide, we don't do until you actually get the commission because that's a very costly aspect of it. But I do drawings. You can do CAD drawings. Ben can do CAD drawings if you don't know how, and I don't know how to do CAD drawings. So if we need CAD drawings, Ben does that for me. So it just kind of depends on what you can do and what your needs are. And ART will talk more about that too.
Right, that's important to emphasize that as an artist, if you don't necessarily have those skills, that's what you're looking to commission.
Yes, and as an artist, I want to spend my time on the skill that I have, and that's using my creative imagination. And I am pretty good at doing models. Some of the computer stuff I'm a little behind on, but that's what Ben comes along and saves me with.
All right, let's have ART bring up their PowerPoint. Will that replace Judy's?
Yep.
And again, feel free to pop your questions either in the chat or the ask a question box at the bottom.
Where are we at now?
Where are we at?
Okay. On your video, go up to the top and you'll see a screen with an arrow. That's how you'll share the PowerPoint.
There we go.
There we go. I'll make it large. Great.
I'll leave it there and go back to the video. Yeah. All right. Are we good?
Are we good?
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. When are we talking?
Yeah, now.
Oh, we are talking now. Okay.
You're on.
Okay. This is Becky Ault, one of the co-owners and founders of Art Research Enterprises. I've got two team members here, Ben Blaney, and my IT guy over here right now is Will.
Hi, everybody.
So we're all here in the conference room, and we're going to explain what Art Research does with the artist and for the artist. And I would like you to know, first of all, that Judy Moore is the best example of total collaboration in order to produce public artwork. This is why we founded Art Research, is for artists like her that like to work together, work in tandem, and to create some magnificent works of art. The company was founded in 1978. We were originally registered conservators doing work in Washington, D.C., moved the company over to Lancaster, PA in '81, started an art foundry. So we are expert at casting. We also cast a lot of stainless steel pieces. We cast aluminum, sometimes silver, once in a while pewter. It's not our favorite metal.
Yep.
Our favorite metals are bronze and stainless steel. Stainless steel because it has this magnificent, beautiful luster glow to it once it's completed. Our organization has evolved over the years, mainly because of our clientele that come to us with a certain need. So we stretch ourselves. We're always trying to update And we are now in the development stages of using CAD and what is that program called, Ben?
SolidWorks.
SolidWorks, which is a wonderful tool. And you will see through the slides so many unique pieces that we produce, but this is just a snippet, such a small snippet of what we've done and what we can do. Would you like to say something, Stuart, Ben?
I mean, one thing, we're just very happy to be all together right now, being able to present to you guys. And this conversation with Judy and the whole purpose of this today has been an ongoing conversation we've had for years with her on the relationship between the artist and the fabricator and how important it is to put the time in, even if the projects aren't happening or your presentation doesn't get picked. That doesn't mean that you stop talking to us. You keep those communications going.
You're right.
And you develop that relationship, because the more we're able to relate to your work, to what makes you unique with your art, the better we're going to be able to do at replicating it.
Yeah, the service.
Yep.
Yeah. Should we do a slide?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to start the slideshow. The first one here.
Okay, this is Audrey Flack. Some of you may know the artist Audrey Flack because of her photorealism paintings during the late 60s and early 70s. Artist out of New York. And because of her photorealism background, when we produce a sculpture for her, she is very fastidious, isn't she, Will?
Very particular.
Very, very particular. She has certain elements. Every artist has certain elements to their sculpture that may be unique only to them. And that's how you can discover when you're out in the world looking at art that you know that piece belongs to them. You don't even have to look at their signature. You just know after seeing so many works of art come through here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So patina area, that's part of Will's expertise.
Yep.
So he's worked with Audrey very close several times. This particular piece is called Queen Catherine. And this, where you see Audrey standing beside her, the big white one, that's plaster. That was restored, and we shipped that to
Butler Museum.
Butler Museum
Ohio.
in Akron, Ohio.
Akron, Ohio.
Akron, Ohio. Next.
This is just a shot of kind of the molding process and a finished bronze. So underneath on the image on the left with Tyler, who's working on the rubber, is a clay, original clay work that was done, and then we were able to do a rubber mold off of that. But your original materials can be plasters, plastics, clay,
Cloth,
wood, cloth. It can be a number of materials. It's not just the traditional has to be clay and that's the only thing can exist. You can have a lot of different media that you use to create your work. Just let us know what it is so we can tell you. That may tell us what direction we need to go as far as the kind of rubber, the kind of mold, and what can be produced from there.
This is Alexander Riceman. And he is a Russian artist living part-time in New York and travels back to Russia quite often. And here we have, I know it's Muhammad Ali, I can't remember the name.
It's called Hero.
It's called Hero. Now, quite often, Alexander produces his own wax patterns. And I must say his waxes are absolutely
Stunning.
Gorgeous, stunning. They are a consistent thickness all the way through. If any of you have worked from molds and produced waxes, you know how difficult that can be to make it a consistent thickness, but they are so pristine. So we cast from his original wax. He does not bring his mold with us, so we have to make certain it makes it all the way through, and he's been very, very pleased. So in the one photo where it shows the artist with the piece, that is raw stainless, and the other one is after it's been patinaed. You can have that one.
So this is another facet that we get into, and it's sand casting. This is a particular one we did, I think, about 12 of these. They're about 6 feet across, and they all went into New York City bridge and tunnel entrances, going in and out of the city, and they are cast stainless steel medallions. And so they were inserted into the columns, into the bridge structure just throughout the city, and they have, of course, the Ever Upward and the Excelsior logos to go with the New York state mottos. And they are colored in the background and then highlighted in the foreground, so it's not just gloss wax casting or things like that we do. We also do sand casting as well, and can do some very large pieces and very small pieces.
Right. Now, this artist produces everything graphically.
Graphically, yeah. So we get a
correct?
PDF to
right.
work from, and that's how it starts.
And that's how it starts. Right.
Two-dimensional.
Right. So there's many different ways for an artist to work in order to work with us.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Right. This is one of my very favorite artists that has been with us for probably 30 years, John Dreyfus out of Washington, D.C. And this is how his work has evolved. Earlier on, he did very representational work. It was still very stylized, almost like a Ellie Nolman. And now he has evolved into producing work that is similar to ancient tools. But even though that looks very simplistic, if it's very simplistic like this, it's really and truly harder to duplicate, because every form, every break in the line, every line has to be absolutely perfect. That's why you see Brian is at this point not using his pneumatic tools, but he is using a block of wood and a piece of sandpaper to make certain the form is pristine.
Yeah.
And that's cast bronze. So you can go for that one.
These are just continuation of those pieces we did. All 6 of these went to National Harbor in Washington, D.C. At the MGM Grand Hotel Casino, and they had a lot of the arts in the casino that they incorporated from local artists, and John was able to be a part of that, and so his are on the top plaza outside of the casino itself.
Yeah.
And so he was able to do a number of different designs. Each one of them was full of challenges. The light reflection had to be right. The lines had to be straight. The patinas had to be what he wanted. And if anybody who works on simple forms knows how complex that is. Everybody can see a sphere. Everybody can see a cube. You don't have to be trained to see those things. And if they're not right, you also don't have to be trained to see they're not right. So those simple ones can actually be harder in the end than some that have a lot of texture and kind of complex shapes.
Right, they're hard to duplicate. And John presents us with milled patterns.
Yeah, he gives us milled patterns or sometimes drawings.
Originally, he produced work such as this in his studio, that size, and he either produced them in plaster or he would make them in wax, and that would be his original. But as technology came into play, and the CAD, 3D printing, and all that information, he moved over to that.
Yeah, he did.
Which is a great tool. That's your favorite guy.
This is one of them. I got a lot of favorites. So this is from the artist Granger McCoy. He is a wood carver. That is what he's internationally known for. He does some phenomenal wood carvings, always aviary, but they're just, you can't tell the difference between the real life and his carvings. And then he was able to do some larger versions of some of his carvings. The one on the left is called Recovery Stroke. And each of the feathers are individually cast and then assembled together, and he was with us doing all that. So on this one, he worked with some local friends of his for as long as they've been alive, and they worked on enlarging the 6-inch model into this 15-foot version in wood, and he carved the wood and put the lines in the way he wanted to, and then we made, I think it was 30-some different molds.
I think so.
On each feather.
Is old master pattern making.
And then we cast each piece, and then he stayed with us for, I don't know, a week or two, just reassembling and putting them all in the right position, and then we were able to finish out. And then the image on the right-hand side, the single feather, is called the Seven Swans. It's just a process shot. This was a combination of casting and what will be fabrication, which you don't see. So there was 7 silhouette swan shapes cut out of stainless, and they were attached in a design on top of the feather. And then the feather itself was cast stainless, and then the entire operation is a water feature. It sits in a pool in South Carolina that is just a constant flow of water actually contacting the bottom of the piece. So in that kind of project, we not only worked with the artist, we also worked with the fountain people, the lighting companies, the on-site contractors, and to facilitate how all these different elements were going to come together and be assembled on site, how they were going to get along, and make sure that we weren't stepping on anybody's toes as we were trying to install our piece. You don't want to damage the water feature. So there were things that had to be done to protect before we even started our part of the process. That if you're not familiar with how to do those kinds of things, you don't even know to ask those questions. And that's something where we do, and we can help with those kinds of things.
Oh, okay, this was a complex piece. It's by Michael Reese, and this is a bronze cast element, and then it has stainless steel rods that go penetrate through it. So it wasn't something that you can just all of a sudden drill holes and think that everything was going to turn out perfectly. So it was mathematically quite a challenge.
This is, again, I go back to collaborating with the artist. This particular artist, Matthew Sudlow, he had an idea that he came to us with, and that was to cast a bonsai tree that he made in wax in one shot, leaves, tree trunk, branches, and all. And we developed a process to be able to do that. We worked with him on his design, and that was really his push for the uniqueness of his piece. He did not want to go digital. He did not want to have this 3D printed. He did not want to have CC milling happening or 3D printing in metal. He wanted this to be as traditional a method as possible to prove you could still do things without having to use a computer. That was kind of his purpose on this. And so we cast this little maple bonsai, and there were over 200 maple leaves on it.
They're thin like real
and
leaves.
They are as thin as a real leaf. And it was cast in one shot, and that's the image with Mark, is right after the casting was done. And then with the finished piece with the patina on it from there.
Right. And of course, that is a technical challenge, even just for casting alone, because you have the very thin elements at the very tips, which we were always concerned would actually freeze off during the casting. Then you have the solid
thick elements.
elements. So, but we were able to engineer our gating and a system correctly.
And produce multiples.
Yeah, we did. Oh yeah, I don't know how many we did. Quite a few.
4 or 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, this project was with Platform Art, that is a non-profit organization out of Lakeland, Florida. And Cynthia Haffey, who is the director of Platform Art, has a yearly art competition with different schools and private schools around the area. And she produces a public art piece that has something to do with the community, and she's been doing this for probably 10 or so years. This is one of our very first ones. They had a competition, and these 2 girls here were the winners of this competition. It went to an electric company. It's for the first responders, the linemen, the linemen. And so represented in this it's kind of all-encompassing, are light bulbs, which tell you it's electric. The sphere, of course, is a universal symbol. And then there is a fairly realistic lineman in the center. And I thought it was a great contemporary piece, but also very representational. So next slide. So this is us producing the piece for them. Now, of course, we knew we did not want to use delicate glass for the light bulbs. So one of our technicians, Brian, came up with a great way to resolve that, which was to use silhouettes of light bulbs, polished stainless steel, with then some applique figures on them, because the young ladies that won the competition inside the light bulb had figures of individuals from the community that were affected by the electric. So this is a nice communication piece. And then there's alignment in the center. And the linemen, the union, thought really wanted to maintain their pole. So there is a pole in there. It does have a crossbar at the top. So it's all encompassing for that community.
Something that might be important to note on, this was funded through grants.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just one grant. There were multiples. So in this instance, we knew that going into it, that this was being funded that way, and that it was probably going to take more than one to accomplish.
Right.
And so we worked with the artist, or in this case, the group, to develop the piece in increments. So
and develop the piece, the schedule
right.
of production went along with the schedule of payments. So
Right.
there's a timing issue, and that's something that we are very aware of.
Yeah.
And we will work with you and your budget. It's nice to know up front what is going on so we can work with you.
Yeah.
Now, who's that?
Somebody we know.
Yes.
So Judy, who is, as we say, has been up here many times for years. That's just an example of how we work with our clients. They get to be a part of it. They can be very involved. It's still their pieces. There's still a lot of that personal connection with things, even if we're taking it from what they originally made of and going through our process. It's not our piece. It's still your piece. And so Will is working with Judy on some of her smaller bronze castings and doing some really delicate little welding and some little jewelry additives that she kind of wanted to keep in play on all this. And so that's just a good example.
And it's a good example of, you saw the 15-foot pieces, soon you'll see 60-foot pieces, but if you look in the background of this slide, the delicacy of the pieces that Will's working on with Judy. And in that background, I think you can see those.
Yeah, 6 inches.
Yeah.
We've done jewelry.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
we've literally
great.
got all the way down to
Right.
people asking us to cast their wedding rings.
Yeah. Yes. And our philosophy has always been here that we are an extension of the hands of the artist, and we are going to keep the soul of the work in that piece that the artist put in there. There they are.
And so you can see kind of a finished piece that Judy did on the left, and then some of her other, and these are mixed media, so she's got some acrylic happening as well as the bronze, and then beautiful patinas to go along with, and then some polishing and things like that that really accents everything.
Oh, well, I'll start this out and then you guys can chime in. This is Carol Goldberg. She's from the Washington, D.C. area, and most of her pieces are found objects originally. The originals are probably no larger than 24 inches, and quite often they're smaller than that. This is an aluminum cast from the egg beater. You could see on the one slide that has the polychrome on it. It's installed at Martha's Garden in DC, which is a great site because as you look at the piece and you look on down in the skyline is the Washington Monument. So those two are still communicating. So it's a fun, wonderful, whimsical piece. And I think you could probably take some from there because you've done so many of hers.
Yeah, so this was definitely where we've done multiples of hers where we actually just literally, she gave us the found objects that she had assembled, and we went straight to mold.
Right.
We went right into rubber, made the mold, did bronze castings, and still kept the same characteristics. So you'd still have the pull switch on the light, you still have the gears, the mechanisms. It's not easy, but there are ways to do things. And sometimes as simple as just connecting those elements you find together and you can start creating things. So she would create whole groups of these. So it looked like a crowd of individuals, and they were all found objects. And then we cast multiples of that. And they were originally inspired by presidential debates. That's where she originally came up with this, was watching them on the screen and seeing everybody involved and watching all these characters, and it spoke to her in that way.
That's great.
And this particular one, for the Martha's table, they're a nonprofit that's about feeding the local people around them. And so, and they had this children's garden that was designed, and they wanted a piece of hers that had that kind of light feel, had good energy to it, that the kids could identify very easily. So the entire thing is about 12 feet tall, and it's a combination of cast and fabricated aluminum, as well as this one was digitally scanned. So it was laser scanned and creased in size, and that gave us the ability to create patterns to scale and keep our proportions the same. And then we worked with her on some subtle design changes, like the handle on the original was down low, and then the pull switch for the light was connecting. Well, first thing everybody thought was, how many kids are going to climb this? So we raised that up. We put it on the high end so they would be less apt to use it as a jungle gym, even though it definitely looks like it would be great. I know my sons would be all over that. But that is what some of those little subtleties can kind of help the longevity of a piece.
This particular piece is a sandcast piece. They are elevators at the Philadelphia Museum, and that's just one of the pieces that we produced for them. It's a beautiful Art Nouveau looking sculpture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just magnificent. And you can see the clean lines, everything is in its place. It's where it should be.
Yeah.
And that's before patina. That's the way raw bronze looks before patina.
Yep.
I think you should take that one.
So this is some more architectural kind of design things. So, a lot of these things now have computer elements to them, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming to you. You can use it as a tool. That's what it is. It's to be a tool. So in this one, the artist created 6 patterns. That's it. Just did 6 patterns, and they were different size boxes. They were stainless steel with a mirror finish, and then they have a clear kind of a candy coat put over them, so you get that translucence feel. And then it was laid out in patterns. So he just used the CAD as a way to give a reference to us, so we knew that the high point needed to point in a certain direction. So 200 and some odd boxes later, individually done, and we had a grid system laid out on the floor in the back of the shop that we still have to this day, and we still use the grid pattern to be able to pinpoint where everything needed to be at and to assemble the pieces. And it was about 16 feet across and 20 feet tall. And it was actually shipped in 2 sections on a semi-truck trailer, went down on site, and it was reassembled together. And on this one, we had to collaborate with the on-site installer. So they had to know how to put this thing back together. And they had to know how to lift it. And they had to know how to clamp it on the wall. So there was a lot of collaboration and time spent with the installing team that was there on how to make all this happen and be as seamless as possible without damaging any of the artwork. It worked out very well. Everything went great. And about a week later, a hurricane came through, and we were all holding our breath.
Right.
But it maintained. Everything looked great. So, that just made you feel confident that, okay, if it survives it right out of the gate, it's going to be fine. There's not going to be any worries. And so those kinds of act of God situations that happened,
It's a nice test.
you adjust.
Ben and Becky, I just want to give you a time check. We want to make sure we get to some questions. There's about 15 more minutes.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
We'll cycle
I
through
just
quick.
want to say one more thing about this. Ben left out, this was so complex. Everything was engineered, a lot of fasteners to put this together. And the guys in the back also had to build a nice big table while they were working on this too. So there's a lot of tooling that goes into our pieces also. That's something that well, if you're not in the shop, you just don't realize all the tooling that goes in to produce works of art. Okay.
So let's cycle through, keep going. We're going to have to cycle through some things to speed up. So this, again, combination of materials, polished stainless steel, working with a designer to come up with this element.
It's obvious.
Um,
This is good.
Designing your piece. Some people, if you're submitting with CAD, using Rhino and things like that to design this graphic elements, then I have to take it from there and convert it to something that's going to work with the engineers, going to work with the construction crews, and put it into kind of another format and design the interior structures, lighting systems, control features, all the little things that actually are going to make the piece do the thing you want it to do, which is kind of a whole other set of skills if you're not trained in. It can be very complex.
Well, now what part she gave you.
And so she gave us the thing on the left with the three kind of renderings and the people around it, and then I've been working on the thing on the right, which is just the interior structures and how everything's going to come together and the patterns for
It's all
everything.
part of engineering. Oh, really?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. This is a John Safer, and this is another piece that went to the MGM Casino Hotel in Inner Harbor, Washington, D.C. Once again, a very simplistic looking piece, but is so absolutely complex. Each of them are 60 feet tall, and they were to be identical. We installed them outside at our facility to make certain they were identical, because we had to produce them laying down with lasers and
Yeah, all kinds of jigs.
all kinds of jigs.
Yeah, it was complex.
To make certain it was correct. There it is, one of them outside.
Yeah.
And
And this had to do wind tunnel testing on
Yeah.
site, so there was another additive to this whole thing for making it real, was going through wind tunnel testing. So the engineers could run the numbers, and then we had to make an adjustment to the size of the piece, the actual depth of it, to make it thick enough to survive and have structure in it.
Right. Yeah.
So those kinds of things that pop up, we work very closely with the artists on, so that they can have their say on how that is going to look. And a lot of tooling.
A lot of tooling, even just the cradling of it on the trucks.
How to lift it. As
Yeah.
Judy said, just learning how to lift these pieces is an art to itself.
Absolutely. And you built specific lifting jigs also.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a great.
And then again, this will be, I think this is the
rapid
last.
prototyping.
Yeah. It was all designed on CAD purely on ZBrush, and then the artist is out of Australia, so I met him once at a dinner, and then I didn't see him again until well after we had done 12 pieces.
Right.
Everything was done through the computer, electronically, and working with him and the 3D
Right.
printer on
That's
how to section
social
everything.
distancing at its best.
Yeah, right?
Mhm.
So we're good for questions.
All right, had to unmute myself, and let's get everybody up enlarged. There is a question. Does ART lead the installation? Do you have to work with local contractors for permits for that part of the process?
Answer is yes, we do.
Yeah, that's a short answer. Is yes. We work with the contractor thing, the permitting and that aspect of things. We can be a part of it, but the artist also needs to be
Involved.
in that aspect. And those are some questions that you like to have up front,
Right.
to know what they're getting into as they're bidding the project.
Great. And another question back to the John Dreyfus works. What was the material and the finish?
Bronze.
Bronze,
They
cast
were
bronze.
bronze, cast bronze, and then they were patinated.
Yep.
That means chemicals with a hot chemicals.
Hot application.
Hot application of the different chemicals to achieve the final coloration. And Will, was it probably 3 or 4 different chemicals that you used, if you can remember?
Yeah, we worked with the artist John Dreyfus significantly for an extended period of time, developing a specific patina that he really liked on his work. And it's a recipe that we primarily only use for his work. So it's what we call like a signature patina for him.
Fantastic. So you keep that recipe.
Yes.
Yep.
I liked your point about funding the work over time, and that you will work with an artist or the organization that's trying to raise funds to create the work, and you develop a schedule for how it can be implemented over a period. Could you speak more to that, and how especially as we might be entering some fiscal challenges and producing work, you know, with the economic downturn, that's a generous feature, a generous service you offer.
Quite often, large monumental public artwork, even just to produce it, may take a year. It may take 2 years. There was a sculpture, a Dr. Seuss project that went to Springfield, Massachusetts several years ago, and that wound up being a 2-year in production project. So that allows the funders to raise their monies, and of course it allows us, because we're not just a one job shop. We may have 50 different types of sculptures going through the plan at one time. It's just that there might be 3 or 4 that are monumental, and the rest of the pieces may be coffee table size. So that allows us appropriate cash flow, and then it allows our clients time to fundraise.
Great. And Judy, I was thinking about, you know, that photo of you looking at the welding on one of those shots. How many times do you go to the Fabricator to do check-in visits and maybe part question here to ART, how are you doing this with physical distancing now?
Well, of course, with the social distancing, I haven't been there, but it depends on the project. You know, there's some projects, and then, of course, the advantage of the fact that we have worked together now almost 20 years, I don't feel the need to go check on them as much as I did with other fabricators that I didn't know and they didn't know me. And of course, the more information I can give them, and when I give them exact models, that's very helpful. But they call me if they need me. I have gone up and stayed overnight, stayed for several days working on things like with the butterfly tree. I sat there because Ben couldn't see where to put them, and I would tell him where to put the butterflies. So there's always that kind of thing, and it just depends on the project. But I don't have to go every day. If something were to happen to me and I have a commission, I know ART could finish it and do it right without my being there, which is a huge comfort. It's also nice to the people who do the commissions that they know that it can be carried through. At any rate, it just depends on the project of how often I go. I like to go because it's fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Judy.
I'd like to make one note on top of what she said there that I think is really important in that whenever Judy comes, she's working directly with our people so that they learn what she's after and all that. But in addition to that, if you have a part of your piece that's very important, tell us about it so we know that that's your signature. Every project will not go perfectly. It will have little things, but we communicate with you and we talk to you about those. So we definitely relationship and communicate how those are going to affect you, things that we have to work through, and come back to that to get back to what the project has to be.
Yeah. Tell them how you're working with Blessing right now out of California.
Yeah, well, she's actually in Hawaii now.
Hawaii.
Right,
okay.
So she's very social distance.
Right.
But again, the little things will creep up between the contractors and the sites and you know, electricians and, you know, this has to be done right now.
Right.
Because some of us were working and some of us weren't. So we're running to that right now, and it's a lot of give and take that we're working with and keeping everybody up to date. I know that's the best thing we can say is look, these are the restrictions we have right now, or these are the things we're allowed to do. So let's work as far as we can in that framework and get to where we need to be, and this is what our time frame looks like. Right. We're not going to hide that on anything. It's going to be very upfront because it needs to be handled. It should not be hidden.
Well, we will communicate with you, and then we just ask that you communicate back with us so that if something has changed on your end, we need to know as soon as possible. When we were doing the MGM installations of the 60 footers, we went on site for the construction site several times to make certain things were going correctly.
And because it's a construction site, you're allowed to be open right now with the COVID-19 restrictions, as your type of business is allowed to operate legally.
We're light construction.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure, shouldn't be able to go back to work.
Right.
Judy, how has COVID-19 impacted your projects and schedules?
Well, at this point, it's hard to say. You know, the one thing I think artists are better prepared to deal with this kind of thing than any other group of people I can think of. We're smart, we're creative, we know how to work in solitude, we know how to work together. This is not a challenge that we have before. It's just a matter of taking it step by step. And yeah, you know, there's always challenges in public art. There's always delays. There's always issues. From a professional standpoint, I see this as just part of an everyday process. We can do it. We're creative. That's what we do. We solve problems. We'll keep moving forward. It doesn't scare me that this is not the end of public art. Just maybe a little different approach.
That's great to hear. And I want to squeeze in one more question. Do you help the artists develop or write maintenance manuals? Because the maintenance is a key part of the longevity of the work.
Absolutely. Since the two of us that founded the company were registered conservators, we understand that issue. So we will develop the appropriate maintenance that should be used on the sculptures, and of course, call us if something truly happens. Talk you through it.
Judy, have owners of your works ever called you back needing advisement on maintenance?
Yes, it's rare. At the moment, I can only really think of one time, but that there was ever a problem. Now, I've had call back and they want a sculpture moved. Fact is, we're getting ready to move the butterfly tree. So there's those kind of things. I've not had maintenance problems except this one time, and it was so minor. It took about 20 minutes and a 20-foot ladder, and it was fixed. So it wasn't a big deal.
Well, that's great. I think a key question, actually, the timeline. How long does it take to make some of those sculptures from the initial conversation to the end?
Well, from the artist
public art takes a long time.
Yeah, from the artist standpoint, if you start from the RFQ, or let's say you start even from the time that you get the commission, it can be anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And a lot of that is just spent in waiting. I know there's sometimes we've had a sculpture and we waited a year for the site to be ready because the construction people were behind time. It rained and they couldn't, or whatever, things like that. Then sometimes, just the process of going through the paperwork, even after they announce that you've won the commission, it may take them 6 months for a contract to come through. So, there's a lot of stuff that when you're not actually physically producing the art, that you're sitting around working on with other people. I love it if someone comes along and say, we want this installed within a year. To me, that's great. Then I have to hope and pray that ART can get it in their schedule. But before I submit, I go and I talk with them. I never submit without meeting with ART and us discussing all of these issues, because I can't commit myself. I'm responsible for that contract, not ART. I'm responsible for it, and it's got my name on it. So if I say I'm going to do this, then I've got to be sure ART can do their part within the same time frame. We have to work together as a unit, and that's what makes it successful.
Well, great. I want to thank everybody. It's just about 4:15 and we'll have to wrap up this session. This is recorded, so it will be filed on the Maryland Arts Summit site. We have more public art sessions. I put it in the chat box, one at 5 p.m. today. Very helpful session with Renee Paichaki, winning that public art commission through preparing for your public art interview. And I really want to thank ART Research for taking the time, for putting together that amazing body of work showing how you work with the artist and fabricate those remarkable works. Judy, thank you for sharing your knowledge and extensive experience developing public art. We'd like to have you guys back again for more public art professional development in the future. I think there's a lot more to dig into here. So for folks attending this session, stay tuned to the Maryland State Arts Council newsletters for more public art professional development, and we'll sign off from here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.